In our recent video on ship components, we omitted a lot of details on one of the more important things, being weapons, to keep the video focused as well as to reduce its length. In this video, I will go through what the various weapon types are, what their stats mean, as well as sizing and hardpoints. I will be referencing Urkel.games a lot through this video, which is a fantastic fan-made tool and highly recommended. So with that, grab your towel and welcome to A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Verse.
Quantum travel initiated.
I will start with the types of weapon hardpoint first. There are three that you may find on your ship. The first is for your standard ship guns, which range from sizes 1 to 7 currently, although there are some exceptions such as the size 10 spinal mount found on the Idris. Weapon hardpoints can hold a single fixed weapon of their size. For example, a size 4 mount can hold a fixed size 4 weapon. You can also fit hardpoints with a varipuck. These gimbal the weapons, allowing them to move freely of the ship, at the expense of reducing their size by 1. So if I fit a size 4 mount with a varipuck, then it will only hold a size 3 weapon. There is an exception to this downsizing, being size 1 mounts, which at this time can fit either a fixed or gimbaled size 1. The trade-off is a major boon for mouse users, as it allows them to aim their weapons with much finer accuracy. It also allows the use of auto gimbals, wherein the weapons will automatically track the target, to an extent, irrespective of where your ship is pointed. In short, it's a trade for accuracy over raw damage, and whether it results in high DPS is down to you. There is also a special type of weapon mount known as the PC2, which can attach two weapons of two sizes smaller. This is unique to the freelancers at the moment, and allows two size 3 gimbaled weapons to be attached to its size 5 mounts. Next is turret hardpoints. Now turrets themselves do have a size, usually between 4 and 6, however these values are arbitrary currently, and have no bearing on the weapon size that they can mount. As an example, the Retaliator has 5 size 4 turrets, yet some of them mount size 3 weapons and some size 2. For that reason, we would only recommend that you look at the size of the weapons that they can mount and disregard the turret size. Usually, turrets can host 2 weapons, however they cannot be gimbaled, as turrets themselves are gimbaled by design. Finally, there are the missile hardpoints. These don't hold missiles directly, but instead are used to mount missile racks. These typically range in size from 1 to 6, with special large amounts utilised by torpedo bombers such as the Retaliator or Eclipse. The racks themselves allow for multiple options in terms of missile payload, with the name denoting the rack size, how many missiles they can hold, and the size of the missiles. For example, the MSD-423 fits a size 4 hardpoint, holds 2 missiles, each size 3. An MSD-442 then would fit the same size 4 hardpoint, but holds 4 missiles, each size 2. As a rule, a rack can hold 1 missile of its size, 2 smaller, 4 that are 2 sizes smaller, and so on and so forth. Onto the fun part then, the weapons themselves. I'll start with guns, which come in 3 firing styles: repeaters, cannons, and scatterguns. Repeaters are categorised by a high rate of fire, but low damage per round. Think Gatling guns. Cannons are the opposite, firing slowly but dealing high damage with each hit. Many consider there to be a subcategory which is mash drivers, which fire much slower, but they hit like a space truck on nitrous. Finally, there are scatterguns. These are essentially shotguns, sporting a short range, firing multiple low damage pellets at once, which combine to pack a wallop. As for what the weapons fire, there are 3 damage types currently. The first is ballistics, which are conventional munitions, hurling a physical object towards whomever is unlucky enough to incur your wrath. These deal high damage to ship hulls, but are slowed by shields, reducing their overall damage unless the target shields are brought down. These have a finite amount of ammunition, and so need restocking every so often. Next is energy damage, which includes lasers, plasma, neutrons, and tachyons. These deal high damage to shields, but are unable to strike the hull until they bring the shields down. Once they reach the hull, they do less damage than ballistics, however, unlike ballistics, they have no ammo limit. Finally, there is distortion damage. Distortion deals massive damage to shields and are capable of bringing ship components offline. However, they are unable to deal any hull damage. It should also be noted that at this time, distortion weapons are bugged, and whilst dealing high shield damage, are often out DPS'd by laser repeaters and do not deal component damage at all. There is a special type of ammo also, which is rocket pods. These deal damage in the same way as missiles, but travel in a straight line like a bullet. I'll come on to this more in the missile section. So what do the stats mean then? First we have the type, which is a combination of the aforementioned firing style and damage type. Next we have DPS, which is how much damage per second the weapons can achieve under perfect conditions. That is, you can make every shot count and the weapon doesn't overheat. This is calculated by ammo damage multiplied by the shots per minute, over 60, times the number of pellets per shot. Ammo damage is how much damage each round causes. Fire rate is the RPM, or rounds per minute, that is how quickly the weapon fires. 60 RPM is 1 round per second, 120, 2 per second, etc. Ammo range is how far away the target can be while still being able to land a shot. This is calculated by the lifetime of the ammunition multiplied by its speed. Ammo lifetime is how long the round can travel before disappearing. Ammo speed is how quickly the round travels. It should be noted that some rounds actually move slower than some ships can in space. Additionally, tachyon cannons are shown on Urkel as having a speed of 800 meters per second. This is not the case, as their rounds travel at the speed of light, so 30 million meters per second. Ammo count is how many rounds the weapon holds, but this is only applicable to ballistic weapons. Pellets per shot is how many rounds are launched per shot, and only applies to scatterguns. Power to EM is the weapon's contribution to your EM signature. IR is the IR contribution. Typically, energy weapons have a higher EM, with ballistics having a higher IR. The higher the values, the further away your target will spot you on their radar. Not shown on Urkel, but is visible on hardpoint.io, is the power and cooling requirements for the weapons. However, Urkel does account for this. Hardpoint also shows the heat generation per shot, as well as the maximum amount of cooling that the weapon is able to receive, which is used to calculate the time taken to overheat under continuous fire. Note that these values are fixed and are not affected by your coolers in any way. Onto self-propelled ordnance. It should be stated that there are actually two types of ordnance, that is missiles and torpedoes. They are for all intents and purposes the same thing, and unless otherwise stated, when I say missile from here on out, I'm referring to both. There are 3 lock-on types available, being infrared, electromagnetic, and cross-section. IR missiles lock onto the target's IR signature. EM missiles lock onto the target's EM signature. Cross-section missiles don't lock onto either, rather they lock onto the shape of the target. Naturally, each of these has its own drawbacks. Ships with a lower IR signature cannot be easily locked onto with these types of missiles, and they can be thwarted with flares. The same applies with EM signatures and EM lock-on, which can be thwarted with chaff. CS missiles struggle to lock onto ships that are small or lack a wide cross-section, such as those with smooth edges, and typically take longer to get a lock. With that said, CS are my personal preference, as they lack countermeasures outside of a pilot's skill to either shoot them down or dip behind an asteroid. These missiles can carry one of 3 types of payload. Strike missiles hit the target with a high explosive charge, with most missiles falling into this category. Cluster missiles unleash a cluster of daughter munitions to swarm your target once they get close. The Rattler is the only one currently. EMP missiles are not currently in the game, but will serve to impart massive shield damage as well as knock systems offline. Think of them as a counterpart to distortion weapons. Onto the stats. These apply to all missiles and torpedoes unless otherwise specified. Incidentally, the same also applies to rockets, except for lock-on time. Type is the type of lock-on method used by the missile. Damage is, quite simply, the amount of damage imparted by the missile strike. Cluster damage, cluster ammo, and cluster count only apply to the Rattler at this time, but it is the damage per, type, and total per missile of the daughter munitions respectively. Explosion radius is the area that the damage is spread across. A low radius indicates a more focused strike, dealing damage to a small area of the ship, with a wider radius spreading its damage over. As a general rule of thumb, missiles have a small radius with torpedoes having a wide. Radius isn't a real consideration at this time. However, when physicalized components are added later in development, A wider radius explosion could be the difference between damage being imparted on components or just the hull. Next we have lock time, which is how long, under ideal circumstances, it takes that missile to lock onto the target. Ignite time is how long the missile takes to begin moving towards the target after you press the big red button. Speed is the velocity of the missile in flight. As a rule, torpedoes are slower than missiles and can actually be outrun by most small ships. And finally, tracking distance is the maximum distance from which you can lock onto your target. Larger missiles typically allow you to lock on from much further. Missile life is also a thing, however it is not listed on Urkel. From my own research, this appears to be 19 seconds for anything up to a size 3, and 10 seconds for anything above, and is how long the missile remains in flight before running out of fuel. So now you understand what everything means, how do you apply it? The first consideration should be your fixed versus gimbaled weapons. As of 3.10, changes are being introduced to help balance fixed weapons, to bring them more in line with the current meta gimbals. In my view, mouse users will still strongly benefit from, and therefore should continue using, gimbaled weapons. The ability to make micro adjustments to your aim rapidly and on the fly, without being held back by your ship's agility, or lack thereof, means that mouse users can easily make up for this loss of damage with accuracy. As for HOTAS and HOSAS users, it's personal preference. Auto gimbals are much more forgiving for those not as comfortable in aiming their ship, especially if you're flying a space brick. Those more versed with a stick or flying a more nimble ship may however prefer fixed weapons instead. As for the damage type, I personally run a mix of the highest shield damage combined with the highest ballistic damage, but it's all personal preference. Scatterguns have the highest DPS potential, but they're risky, as they require you to get up close and personal, which is not ideal in a more fragile ship. Looking at you, Drake. Outside of this, repeaters usually have the highest DPS potential, so long as you can keep the target under fire for a large window. The exception to this is in distortion weapons, where slower firing cannons can out DPS the repeaters. For energy weapons, look to the neutron weapons first, otherwise, the Klaus and Werner CF series are the best overall. For ballistics, the Gallinson GT series or Apocalypse Arms repeaters come out on top. It's also best to avoid any weapons that have a low ammo count, lest you find yourself undefended at an inopportune time. My personal rule is at least 3 minutes of continuous fire. This can be calculated by taking the ammo count and dividing by the RPM. Due to their buggy nature at the time of recording, distortion weapons aren't advised, however the Joker series are the best at the smaller side. Size 4 and up, your only options are the Preacher scatterguns. Missiles are a difficult one. Personally, I would always recommend whatever has the highest damage output of a given size, and cross-section if possible. As for the size you should take, consider this. If you have a size 3 missile, that will do less damage than 2 size 2 missiles, which does even less damage than 4 size 1s, and also leaves you with less missiles overall. However, the smaller the missile, the closer you need to be to launch it. Additionally, whilst the potential for extra damage is there, so is the potential for your target to thwart that second, third or fourth hit. The choice is yours. And that's all for that. Leave your thoughts below and let us know if there's anything else in Star Citizen you want us to cover. We thank you for watching, and we'll catch you all next time.